Hi Chris, this is Colby here. I'm going to give you a quick tour of my final project. We'll start off looking at my proposal. What I wanted to do is a VGI web mapping tool where customers could report service locations to a public works department or something of that order. I wanted to use leaflet, display the icons by whether they're new, resolved, under review, things like that. I also wanted to tackle some jQuery, and push myself out of my comfort zone a little bit with this project, and I certainly achieved that. So starting off, we're going to look at a few snippets from the project. I tried using Google Fusion tables. That's what this is an image of. I started a table and just input a line, and my first kind of mission was to see if I could read that onto a page. I was able to find some code that allowed me to do that successfully. That's what we're looking at here. It's the same information pulled from this table. And this was the code that allowed me to do that. One of the interesting things that I came to learn about Fusion tables is that they require some encoding to use. And that was a barrier that eventually ended up driving me away from using them. So Fusion tables were interesting, but I was never able to write to them. So I ended up going for Google Spreadsheets. So you posted a page that talked about using Google Spreadsheets to post to the spreadsheet, and this is an image of that. I went to the basic page, testing it out. This is a comment, a couple forms, filling in the page. I set it up and tried it out, set up a spreadsheet, tried it out, and it worked successfully. One of the interesting things about this is that it's not as simple as just writing the JavaScript and making it happen. You actually have to, along with these spreadsheets, within them, there's actually a script itself that writes a Google web app. And without this, it really wouldn't work to get or post data to the sheets. So that's a critical component that I got from someone else and would not have been able to figure out otherwise. This next little piece that I'm moving on to is I was reading data from the table. You'll notice it's in a nice JSON format over to the right, and the console is logging that information. I ended up using tabletop.js to make that happen. It was a nice little simple JavaScript library. Just copy and paste it right in and use the public access link to the Google spreadsheet, and it can read it. It has to be a published web sheet, and that makes sense. So there's some security concerns with using it, but for my purposes, it worked great. Moving on a little further, here we're looking at beefing up my form a little further, adding in more fields, more of the information that I wanted to get from the customers. And also, again, down below, you're still seeing that I'm still able to access the table and print that to the page. Now we're looking at a test for the form. As you can see, I filled in a few fields. And as you can see, the test works successful, so that is fun. I was happy to move on from that. Then I added in the latitude and longitude components. This is a piece that I was able to copy from one of the JS bins that you had provided in class, and I was pretty much able to cut that right in. But something, I don't think you can notice it on this page, but I actually used hidden forms to hide that lat long. As you can see, the lat long is working right here, and it's printing the information. Now we can look through some of my JS bins as we progress through. Again, this is kind of one of the ones I used a lot to work with, this one that you provided us. It was a good groundwork for my project. This is the component, the post component. the JavaScript is right here in this jQuery onload function, and what it does is it looks at what you entered, serializes the data, and then sends it to the form. There is some testing in here and also some response items. So if you enter something into the form, it's going to let you know that something happened and then it got sent to this location. Or maybe in the console, it's gonna log that something happened. Hooray, it worked. So the data is getting written. So this was it was good to have this working component to move forward. This is just building up the forms further. Again, accessing that nice clean JSON data where all the crazy coded fields that spreadsheet comes up with have been removed. At this point, I moved on to starting to build the time map. I knew it was going to be a big hurdle for me, and there are no working solutions for integrating time map with Leaflet Online. There is a LA Times map, but it's so altered that there's no way I could access it. So I tried using a Google map, and push come to shove, it was going to require so much time educating myself on the use of Mapstraction, on the use of the Simile timeline, and the use of TimeMap.js all separately that I'd end up having to cut it. It just wasn't going to work. So I cut my losses and moved on. I guess you can't be afraid of failure. So I brought in a nice leaflet map, got some nice basic styling. I was happy with how the project was looking at this point. You can click and add the point, move it around, no issues with that. Now I moved on to actually loading data, and that again, just using the tabletop.js and then just adding markers for the data. Moving on again, I ended up adding in a jQuery slider. It ended up being far easier to make work at filtering time than the time map was going to be. And at this point, it's not working correctly, but being able to get a graphic piece in there that's working as a solo component, I was happy to have that. And from here moving forward, I was able to tie the data back together with the time slider. Oh, you'll also notice I've got my layers brought in. I wanted to integrate Google Maps. The hybrid maps are too good to pass up as far as what I think a user would need to place an accurate location. They're going to want streets as well as satellite. I also included OpenStreetMap in this set. So you'll see a number of things in here, a number of overlays that I built in: resolve reports, in process, new reports, heat map. As time goes on, the heat map will become more and more interesting from the standpoint of the city. They'll be able to review where they're getting a lot of reports that might have to do with aging infrastructure or something along those lines. Moving on to my final vision for the project, I wanted to have it be within Rochester, the city of Rochester. I worked for them last summer and will be applying to become a GIS analyst with them very soon. As you can see, I brought in a legend. It doesn't mean anything at this point, but I'm starting to apply, the classes and themes. And again, at this point, it seems like there's no data loading, but at this point, the spreadsheet connected to this page has no data for the city of Rochester. I hadn't made that fake data yet, so it's just not there yet. And then this is when I was first able to get the links or the data linked up to the time slider. So I was pretty excited to get over that hill. Now moving on to the final product. I came into this project with what I wanted to do in mind, and I really had a strong vision that this would be built right into a city's web page where customers could report things that they find. So what I did was I actually just took the header, took the sidebar, and kind of the design of the City of Rochester Stormwater Department's page, and cut that into the styling for my project. There's some basic information on how to use it. On load, it shows the different points: resolved, in process, new. If you use the time slider, you'll notice that the blue color coordinates with those points. So the time slider is what's being filtered in blue, with most of them showing up on the end. Or we can stretch it for the entire time span and see all of them. We can turn these things off, so we can just look at those dates. If we just want to look at those one at a time, we can do that as well. Also, all these have pop-ups attached. There's basic information: date submitted, service status, issue type. This is partly a privacy issue. I didn't want to insert any of the comments or anything like that. So, and then the heat map, it's a little more interesting at this point because I've started to input more and more data points. So as it continues to become populated, it'll become more interesting. This is my form. I ended up splitting it half and half, floating a div to the left and a div to the right. I was really happy with how clean it turned out. I was able to build in some requirements for the form. So first off, you got to fill in the required fields, which have an asterisk. That one's already filled. This is filled. You also have to change this. Okay, it said I didn't select a location. So you got to select a location, choose the issue type. Is it a matter of public safety? No. Callback or email? No. And then we'll just test this. Alright, it says that sending the data was a success. We'll give the page a reload. And now you can see that points on the page. Now we can dive into the actual structure of it. One of the really interesting things was that Leaflet apparently inherently binds a pop-up to the City of Rochester, or to KML files that are uploaded, and it took me a long time to get around that issue. What I ended up doing actually kind of breaks stuff, but it does work to write to the table. As you can see, Colby's comment is here. But what I ended up doing is, you can notice that you can move the icon around outside of the KML, but the second you click on the KML, we get all sorts of errors from Leaflet. And I tried to get around this several different ways. It didn't seem to me that anyone has a solution online that works real great, so I was happy that I got it to work as well as I did. What I ended up doing is basically just writing an on-click function that immediately closes the pop-up before it can push it out. And that is in the JavaScript over here. But yeah, I was surprised that most of the people's solution was tracing the KMLs as a polygon, which was not an option as far as I was concerned. So this is the little on-click function that I wrote to prohibit that pop-up from getting in front of our face. If we restart the page and it loads correctly, you'll notice we're not getting any issue here. And then all of a sudden, I can't place a point in there. I could double-click and get one in there. A really fast double-click will do it. But I didn't think that was a good usability option. So I ended up going with this function that was quite effective as far as I'm concerned. We can look a little more at the JavaScript. There's a lot going on. It's a complex process, or it's a complex project. some of the different things I got going on. I have a master plugins for the Google Maps. I have that jQuery slider. More of the plugins for the KML. I used leaflet.sprite.js for the color of the icons for the map. So I'd certainly used quite a few plugins for Leaflet, and I was happy to get that experience. Oh, the heat map is on there as well. So now starting at the top of our JavaScript, these are all just my variables that I use to hold my marks and my layer groups. Here we have our heat map layer, looking at Google tile layers, moving through starting the map and setting some of its attributes, layer controls. Here we have the beginnings of our legend, which I think the rest of the legend component got moved way to the bottom. Then we have our jQuery onload. First we set up that submission form. So it's looking at requests, firing off different events. It ends up serializing the data. And here's where I built in the limitations on what a user can input. So basically, if certain fields were empty, or if certain fields were not showing up in the serialized data, it would fire off a div that would tell them to try again because they're not getting what I need. So moving down the layer, moving down. This is our simple map on click to move that get that lat long. Here we have accessing the public spreadsheet. And then this is where we actually have slider changes. And this is what's actually filtering what will show up as the blue icons on the map. Here's our sprite icons being used and binding pop-ups with simple data submitted, service status, issue type. And that's actually, I kept this as a separate because of the slider being changed. So on a separate for loop, I assigned more sprite icons to the new in process and resolved reports. And I use that with an else if statement in a for loop. So this was just setting the map to focus on my KML layer. Again, this is that workaround for the KML that breaks Leaflet, but not so terribly that something bad happens. This is to keep the date in my time slider current. I was finding that sometimes data was not showing up until the next day, so I was able to get this little snippet that looks at tomorrow and 1 hour and 1 minute later. So, and this is our date range slider loader. Some of the options, bounds, default values, range. So you'll notice this is tomorrow. So every day it gets longer. Every day it'll get a day longer, just built into it. So that's a nice function. This is simply our get color for the icons, and then our legend components, and that's the gist of the project. I'm extremely happy with how it ended, or how I finished it up. I think it's a nice clean product, and it's very usable and has some interesting features. And I think it, once people realize that they could just hop online and report an issue when it's that easy, I think it gets people off the phones, making the city more efficient while also logging that data and keeping history and also keeping it transparent for everyone to see. I hope you enjoyed the little walkthrough, and that's it. I had a great semester. Thanks.